Today's topic, New Landscape, encapsulates my day-to-day life. I'm going to talk to you about this title, What Power a New Landscape Holds for Me. But first I should tell you that I'm a production designer in the movie industry, and even within my own industry, it seems that I often have to elaborate on the details of my job. I am a visual storyteller. I create the visual landscape to clarify, to illustrate, to highlight, to augment the narrative. I design the scenery, the architecture, I choose the palette, the furnishings, the vehicles, even the animals. And with these and many other components, I create the required new landscape. Could be up there in County Antrim, or within the four walls of a stage at Pinewood Studios. For the film The Borrowers, we needed to build the exterior of their family home. The location department found a great plot in Kew in London, and we duly constructed the house, dressed in the garden, the gravel driveway where we parked the family's Morris Minor. So imagine my surprise when the very experienced makeup lady commented to me that despite having lived in the area for many years, she'd never noticed this house before. So she was obviously mortified when I took her around the back and showed her all the scaffolding and the mess. And this is a classic example of my own colleagues who really are not aware of all the work that the art department has to do long before they arrive. And actually, on that note, mythology has it that the location manager saw a real-life postman post a letter through the letterbox. So that was quite nice. When I speak of landscapes, I may be referring to the ever-changing beauty of the mountains of Mourne, but equally, I could be thinking of how I might dream up the King's Landing brothel or Bridget Jones' Thailand prison. For me, the title New Landscape evokes the next world that I must try to visualize for you, the discerning audience. And that dreaming up is a task in itself. Which landscape? What story? Where can I reference Bridget Jones' favorite drinking hole? Where can I source her mum's wallpaper? In Finding Neverland, we wanted Johnny Depp, his character, to dance with a bear at the Palais de Danse. That's a huge number. How can we visually show an academic, such as Iris Murdoch, as she descends into the darkness of Alzheimer's? How does this affect the way she and John Bailey cohabit in their already chaotic home? I designed a 7-hour miniseries for HBO called John Adams. This was based on an excellent book by the eminent American historian called David McCullough. John Adams, a brave, strong, driving force behind the movement for independence, and briefly, the second president of the USA. And interestingly, I'm told that the HBO continues to air it every year on July 4th for their celebrations. It was incredibly challenging, as all my efforts to find a new landscape were more crucial than ever, I felt, because here was a slice of 18th century American history far too important to be fogged by the vanities of filmmakers. So historically, although the action initially took place in Massachusetts and Philadelphia, we built and shot in Virginia. We built John Adams' iconic childhood home in the grounds of the local prison. Many of the inmates provided very affordable labor. And actually, we were also very strongly advised not to wear orange when we came to work. So later, when John Adams visited France, England, Holland, we shot that all in Hungary. And crucially, due to some fiscal and scheduling issues, I was asked to recreate the landscape for John Adams' final family home, Peacefields, in Hungary. So we found a great spot, and we set to build the 18th century colonial East Coast American home. But our first hurdle was where we'd planned to build the Adams family garden. There was a gigantic forest of brambles and undergrowth, which turned out to be hiding a huge ditch over 50 foot wide and 20 foot deep. Anyway, eventually the house was built, the gardens and fields planted out, and the big barn erected, and Abigail Adams had her very own duck pond. And it was an astonishing sight, early 19th century East Coast America, sitting in a field in Hungary. The gorgeous interior to the house was built on a stage at FOT Studios in Budapest, but we managed to burn the whole stage to the ground. Smouldering ashes was all that was left of interior Peacefield when we arrived for work on a very sad Monday morning. No set, no carefully selected colonial furniture, no specially dyed drapes. I could go on, but it was very, very heartbreaking. But I believe now the smoking ban does hold in FOT Studios. Must have been that. So, not surprisingly, I love my job. The movie industry is a collaborative one, and my department, the art department, is surely the best place to be. I cannot design and draft, plaster and paint all alone, so I get to work with a huge array of incredibly talented people. I have an art department which has as many art directors and draftspeople as necessary to get the job done. I will work closely with a set decorator and a construction department. Additionally, we have sculptors, specialized scenic artists, marine experts, leather workers, portrait painters, joiners. And then there's always those wonderful individuals who happen to have a warehouse full of carriages or a basement full of bones. I may build a ship in a car park or a garden on a stage. I may be compelled to employ the assistance of the people that lay down snow for a winter landscape or scout the deserts of Morocco for a summer garden. Over the years, I've often found myself working away on location and having to source items that in the UK would be completely easy. When working in Sri Lanka some years ago, we were dressing a hospital set and having to use real equipment. No facsimiles existed, and apparently no JCBs either. So my anxious prop master came to see me with a frown on his face as he explained the only way he could see a particular item making it onto the set was to employ the assistance of an elephant. Needless to say, I was delighted at the prospect, and that's what happened, completely efficiently. And I've been lucky enough to travel to some incredible places in the world to find the perfect landscape, even here in Bray to do Neil Jordan's film The Miracle. I've worked in this industry, and before that, designing sets for the theatre for many, many years. After completing a degree in painting at St. Martin's Art School, I was lucky enough to do a postgraduate under the auspices of an incredible woman called Percy Harris. Percy was herself 1/3 of a triumvirate of women who worked under the title of Motley. Art school had been a bit of a disappointment for me, as I'd had to discover that even though I could physically put paint on a canvas, I wasn't an artist in that sense. I couldn't find any sense of my landscape within the confines of a stretched canvas. But once I had a script within which to immerse myself, my imagination could travel anywhere at all. Any or all new landscapes totally up for consideration. And so I worked for about 9 years in the theatre, including a year here in Dublin, most of which was at the Project Arts Centre, which was then run by Jim Sheridan, so a while ago. After which, due to several very happy circumstances, I shifted into films and movie making. And as much as I love the flights of fantasy and the sheer audacity of the way landscapes be created within the four walls of a theatre, my imagination soared even more when working in the movies. The potential for a new landscape just knows no boundaries. And an exciting and more recent component in my design process and new landscape creation is the collaboration with the visual effects world. They can drive me completely nuts, but on a positive note, they literally do enable us to consider the whole wide world our oyster. You, the audience, quite possibly, subliminally, now expect not one ship in full sail, but a whole fleet. Combining the imagination and artistry of the art department with the sophisticated skills of the visual effects department means that there is no new landscape that cannot be considered. And technology is changing all the time. So what was too complex yesterday is completely achievable today, as long as you have the budget. I suspect that one of the reasons I'm really here is because I designed the world for Game of Thrones. For those of you not familiar with this title, It's a very successful HBO TV show, which is currently shooting its 5th year. I believe they'll continue for another 3 years before the story is finally told. An epic tale, written by George R.R. Martin. I had the unique good fortune to be in at the beginning, and over 4 years, I created the worlds for all the characters and their myriads of tales. We were based in Belfast, as indeed they still are, and it's shot all over Northern Ireland. We also went to Iceland, to Dubrovnik, to Morocco, and this year they're adding Spain to their new landscapes. It was a mammoth undertaking, not least for the job of the designer. Every group of characters came from their own specific part of the invented Game of Thrones landscape. And every landscape had to be clearly delineated, and that was my job. The producers, the writers, the directors, we all knew that for the success of the series, every world had to be clearly visualized in a unique and pertinent way, such that any audience attempting to follow the machinations of the vast cast of characters would have huge assistance from the visual storytelling. We wanted our audiences to know immediately which strand of the tale they were following by the architecture and the palette, the individual landscape for every character. As I said, we shot freely in the Northern Irish landscape. So, for example, when the Khaleesi Daenerys rode out with her new husband in the heat and dust of lands east of Westeros, we were actually shooting in very chilly, very wet Chillinavogie. Up on the North Antrim coast, there's a beautiful and perfect natural harbour called Ballantoy. I was shown it and recognized what an innately beautiful, natural, new landscape was here. After a couple of weeks of intense work with both construction and set decoration, we were ready to shoot Theon's return to the Iron Islands. At the beginning of season 2, a very strong image of huge religious effigies burning on the beach was required. I found this image particularly affecting due to the relationship or the echoes it held for me with current wars and the subsequent destruction of religious iconography. We chose Downhill Beach for its size and relationship to the cliffs beneath the imagined fortress of Dragonstone. And then there are the new landscapes, which need to be built on the stages. Those images which leap from the printed page to my imagination and then onto the stages for realization. As much as designers love to appropriate an existing landscape, even more we love to create our own new landscapes from scratch. And Game of Thrones was no exception. By the time I finished, we had 6 stages in Belfast and an old linen mill in Banbridge, all heaving with my sets. We created the gossip-fueled corridors, the passionate secrets of the bedchambers, the not always discreet comings and goings in the brothels, and that's just King's Landing. We built huge cavernous caves, the confined spaces on board various ships, torture chambers, taverns, battlements, and I can't forget the ice wall. It was an incredible job, and to think I left it all behind. I decided that 3 seasons was a perfect length of time for me as a designer to really create the look for Game of Thrones. I could have continued, but there's a big old world out there, and now I'm engrossed on a powerful new landscape for a movie which is sort of an original take on King Arthur, but I can't really say much about it. And so, to finish, what I would really like is for you all to consider your own inner landscapes, because I truly believe that we all have an important inner landscape, and that no matter where we pass our lives, if we were to close our eyes for a moment or two and think back, that inner landscape will forever reflect the lands we very first remember, where we took our very first steps. The Targaryen heat is forever in Daenerys' veins, and however long John Adams may have spent in European luxury, he was always a man most confident with soil running through his fingers. Thank you.